Hey everybody, welcome to the Mother FIGRs podcast. I'm Caitlin Darkangelo, founder and co-owner of Figure, Midwestern wife, and girl mom. I'm a dual certified pregnancy and postpartum trainer, majored in exercise science from the University of Michigan, earned my master in management degree from Duke University, and have been coaching in the fitness industry for over a decade. This podcast dives into all things pregnancy and postpartum fitness, especially in how to navigate strength and intensity training in these seasons. Whether you're in it yourself, trying to get pregnant, or coaching this population, you're in the right place. I'm excited to share personal experiences, client stories, guest interviews, and evidence-based strategies to give you the guidance, insights, and clarity needed to navigate these seasons with confidence. And with that, let's get rolling. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Mother FIGRs podcast. I recently, this past weekend, actually just had my third session of my Mother FIGRs Coaches certification course. So this is where I train providers, so they could be fitness trainers, Pilates instructors, massage therapists, chiropractors, anybody who works with women in pregnancy and postpartum and just wants to learn the fitness lens to be able to more appropriately and helpfully, if that's a word, coach their pregnant and postpartum clients or work with them in whatever capacity they're in. This is a in-person workshop. So there's a lot of great certifications out there when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum training. However, most of them are either textbook or go at your own pace or just kind of like watch stuff and take notes. And there's a great benefit to that, to learn a lot of the in-depth stuff. However, when it comes to practically applying and working with women in real life, in real time, there's a lot of things that go into cueing and just knowledge information and being able to practically work with this population. And so I wanted to provide a certification course that is more around that realm. So the hands-on practical tips, like how to actually coach this population, which is what coaches need, and that's what we do on a daily basis. So I created that this year, and I have now had 16 different providers be Mother FIGRs certified and become Mother FIGRs coaches, which is super exciting. So that was on Saturday, and a lot of great questions came up within the course. So I'm going to go over just briefly like the sections that we go over in the certification course. And then I wanted to dive deeper into a few of the specific topics that we spent a little bit more time on discussing, or questions that they had that were really great that apply to you if you are one of those people who do work with women in this population, or if you are pregnant or postpartum yourself and just want some deeper understanding into some of these topics. So this is kind of like a Q&A style podcast. I'll be going over some different unrelated topics of what we went through in the coaches course and kind of going piece by piece. So in general, the coaches course is broken up into a few different sections. First, we lay the foundation of pregnancy and postpartum fitness when it comes to what's happening in the industry, its history, stuff like that. We go into deep core and pelvic floor foundation. So anatomy, physiology, function, that kind of stuff. Symptoms, signs from a pelvic perspective and a core perspective, what we can be looking for in our clients as they go through these seasons, and then different symptom management techniques. Then we go into more of the workout considerations. So during pregnancy, postpartum, what are the general guidelines? What are our kind of buoys or markers that help us guide pregnancy and postpartum adaptations to exercise? And then we go deep into a lot of different styles of training. So we start from a basic standpoint that anybody can use in any area. That's stuff like breath work, pelvic floor relaxation and stretching, mobility and deep core specific work. And then we get into core and core training during pregnancy and postpartum specifically. And then there's the weight training. So squats, deadlifts, lunges, pushes, pulls, traditional movement patterns. And then I also coach into intensity training, advanced movements, cardio training, metabolic training, metcons, and things like that. So that's kind of the broad scope of what we talked with. I'm not going to go into all of this because that is my 4-hour course. It will take forever. And that is something that I would love to have you in. I'll actually put in the show notes a wait list to get onto my next coaches certification workshop. But so some of the questions that came up, it was really interesting because in this session, I had 6 ladies. One was an online fitness coach, 2 had a more functional fitness foundation, 1 was a Pilates trainer, and then 3 were yoga instructors, or like kind of a crossover. Some of them had functional fitness and Pilates regardless. So we had some cool backgrounds, some different scopes to look through from a fitness modality perspective, and that brought about different questions and things. So that's kind of what we'll get into, is how it applies to different areas of fitness. So the first one that was super interesting and we had a lot of great conversation about was rotational core exercises during pregnancy. So this first got brought up because rotation during pregnancy is something I really recommend and really love for pregnant moms. It used to be something that was feared out of moms in from like a baby sense, like twisting was going to hurt the baby, or just because your belly is growing, that twisting might have felt restrictive. However, it is a movement pattern we should be keeping in during our pregnancy, because we have this like sling, if you want to think about it, or this like X, I guess not an X, but like a crossover between either side of our core muscles. And anytime we do a rotation, it's almost as if one side of our core muscles gets to talk to the other side of our core across the linea alba, which is that connective tissue that we see, that coning, that doming, that bulging sensation or symptom come through. I can get into this in a whole other podcast about just deep core anatomy and stuff like that. But crossbody movements or rotational movements helps us translate tension across that linea alba, or that center connective tissue midline. And that's going to be helpful in developing and maintaining tension in our core, which is what we want to keep during pregnancy so that we can stay as connected to that muscle system and to that connective tissue system as possible, so it can be easier to recover postpartum. So we really want, like, think about like those two halves of our core talking to each other across that like chasm essentially, and we're building or keeping that connection as deep as possible. And rotation helps us with that. So whether that be chops or Russian twists or Pallof twists, anything that we're like kind of rotating or using both sides of our core to kind of connect, that is something I love doing. So that was one of the topics that we talked about. And the question came first from one of the yoga instructors of she loved using Russian twists in her yoga classes. However, she found that a lot of pregnant moms would just skip that movement and not do it out of fear mostly, and that she wanted some practical tips on how to help them continue doing that or modifying that movement so it felt more comfortable for them. So in a Russian twist, your heels are up, you're on your butt bone, you're kind of in that boat pose, and then you're twisting side to side. That can get super restrictive during pregnancy when your belly starts to grow. So my first modification would be always to drop the heels first and drop any weight that you're using in your hands. That generally will help increase the range of motion by dropping the heels, so you get a bigger space for your belly to rotate. And then dropping the weight can help it feel more comfortable and less restrictive as well. So once we drop the heels and drop the weight, if that is still kind of feeling funky or like they aren't able to do it to the full capacity, I would always decrease the duration or the amount of time that the mom is doing that for, or like kind of put it into like interval style. So if you're doing Russian twist for a full minute with the whole class, for instance, I would have her think about doing it like 10 seconds off, rest for 10 seconds, 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off. And just still be able to get that rotation connection, because it is something that we want to be doing during pregnancy. But the volume, maybe we can decrease that a little bit by making it more interval-based versus an endurance-based exercise. And as normal, like always have the mom rest when needed. There's also a breath timing modification that we can do or apply to help keep more core connection, so we don't get that like arching or rib flare sensation, which would essentially break the core connection down that midline, putting pressure outwards, which is also what we don't want to do. So we want to think about first that core alignment before we get into the breath. So we want that rib cage to drop over the hips, and that's going to help us create this like stacked and really locked sensation through our core. Then our core muscles are engaged, and then we rotate from there. Adding the breath after the alignment, I would cue the mom to inhale as they twist to the side. So kind of allowing that breath to lengthen our core muscles as we spin out or torque ourselves to the side. And then we're exhaling, driving the belly button into the spine and kind of coming back to neutral on that exhale. So allowing or timing the breath out to the movement pattern of a Russian twist can help them feel more connected. So inhaling again as you twist out, exhaling as you come back to center. That can also help the mom keep that core engagement throughout a twist. So if all of those modifications or adjustments still, the mom feels restricted or they feel uncomfortable doing it, if you're doing it in this class setting, if you're doing it on like a one-on-one, obviously you can remove stuff like this, but this is specific to like group class style training. What do you do when you have Russian twist program and you have a pregnant mom in your class? So if all of that fails, essentially, I would have them stand up and do like weighted or banded rotations. So in a yoga class, for instance, I would have them have like a light dumbbell in their hand, hold it out straight in front of them and do the same breath timing as the Russian twist. So inhale as you rotate out to the side, exhale, draw the belly button in, rib cage drops down, and then rotate back to the center. That's going to be the same movement pattern as a Russian twist. They can still do it in the class and still be included in the class activity. Now, but when we're standing, we have a little bit of more range of motion, a little bit more control because we're not like locked in at the hips as we would be in a kind of modified boat hold position on the ground. And so that just allows for a little bit more rotation, maybe a little bit more comfort and a little bit more control for that mom doing Russian twists. If I was in a gym setting, I would make this a pay-off twist. So with a band, I love my crossover symmetry bands that I have in my gym. That's the same thing. You're going to be exhaling as you come back to the center, inhaling as you release the tension and let the band kind of come to the side. So that would be another variation that we can do for a rotation exercise instead of Russian twist. So we can also do chops with that same thing. So instead of going in a horizontal twist, we can chop it. So it's like a wood chopper where you're picking something up from the ground like a dumbbell and then chopping it going all the way overhead. That same kind of crossbody will be giving us a similar stimulus as the Russian twist. Not to say that Russian twists are like for sure you have to keep them in throughout your whole pregnancy or else you won't create this midline tension. That is not true. There's so many different exercises. Most of it is just loading through strength training, to be honest. But we're just talking about rotational exercises specifically during this conversation. So that was super interesting. Now, the second piece of this was the Pilates instructor who was under the impression or didn't feel comfortable doing rotation with her clients in her Pilates classes because of a whole different set of circumstances. So we have the reformer, which decreases or increases the instability essentially of our core, which makes it tougher. They also did twisting motions or rotational movements with long hold. So they were holding that rotation position for a long time, and they were extending their arms or legs in different varieties or different angles. So there's a whole bunch of different components that were attached to these rotational exercises that was causing her to remove rotation as a whole outside of her programming, which is totally fine because during pregnancy and Pilates, there's a lot of things going on outside of just the movement itself. But we kind of picked apart this specific scenario. Instead of it being a rotation, as in like you should not be doing rotation exercise during pregnancy in Pilates, it wasn't the rotation it was the combination of a ton of different modalities and things essentially happening at the same time that made rotation exercises a little bit tougher for pregnant moms to do. So with the movements she was talking about specifically, and this is going to be tough to describe, essentially you were twisted and like holding that rotation position with one part of your body on the stationary part of the reformer and one part of your body on the moving, I don't know the exact term of the moving piece of the reformer, but the part that moves. And then as you were extending yourself out in that rotation, you were also extending either an arm or a leg or both at the same time and kind of holding that position for a long time. So there's the endurance hold of the rotation. there's anytime you extend away from your core center, that part is harder on your core as well. So there's the extension away from that midsection. Then there is the unstable surface that you're on, that is the moving part of the reformer, that's also forcing your core to balance and stay stable more than if you were on a mat per se. So it was more so, it wasn't the rotation that was causing pregnant moms to feel this like unsafe feeling, or however the mom describes it. But it was the combination of that full extension, the unstableness, and the endurance of the hold. So that's why I love kind of talking with different moms or different trainers in different areas of fitness, because rotation itself is not unsafe for pregnancy. However, in different training modalities, depending on what else is also happening at the same time, maybe it would be best to scale rotation back in that instance. Then we kind of talked about pulling some of those other parts out of that movement and keeping the rotation and making it more of kind of like a Russian twist, where you're coming in and out of that twisting position. We're not just holding that twist, because that can start to get restrictive too. Not saying it's unsafe, but it just might feel uncomfortable or less effective than a more repped out type of rotation exercise. So that was kind of a really interesting perspective from Pilates versus yoga versus strength training. So that was super interesting. So that was question number one, or like topic one, that I wanted to highlight here. Number two was how to coach breath, deep core, pelvic floor intricacies, foundations, all that stuff in a class setting. So this pertains more to those who work with this population, but it also applies to moms who are in that situation. If you are in a class setting and you need help with something that's core pelvic floor related, but you know you're in a class setting and the coach has a lot of other things to do, like what can you guys do about it to make sure that you are cared for or that your client is cared for, but you don't disrupt the whole class like environment or atmosphere? So the first thing I recommended was to talk with them before class. If it is their first time coming at all, maybe doing like a 10 to 15 minute consultation on the phone, and then talking to them when they come to class, have them come a little bit early, chat through some stuff. Or if you are the client, letting them know like, hey, can I come to class early so I can like tell you what's going on, essentially. And during that conversation, it's really important to talk about the fitness history, what you're interested in, what you have done before, what your capabilities are, maybe your own personal like comfortability or your mindset or fears around whatever phase of life you're in. Maybe you just found out you're pregnant and you're like, I feel really uncomfortable doing anything. So the coach can know then that like that's something that you're struggling with, and they can meet you where you're at and work with you from there. Maybe it's fears or things that you've heard about that type of exercise that you're about to do that you want to make sure are covered. We should also know like different symptoms that you're experiencing, or signs, or just like predispositions, things that would potentially play into fitness modifications. And then also talking about like what you already know about deep core work. Do you already know how to connect with your deep core? Do you know how to properly breathe? Do you know about your core and pelvic floor alignment and how that plays into our core engagement? Like, what is your baseline of knowledge that we can then better help you? Or if you're the coach, you can better help your client on all these basics. So that would be my first recommendation, is talking with them before class, if that's like the bare minimum. Then in a class setting, my second piece of advice was to work on one thing at a time. In a group style fitness class that's not specific to pregnancy or postpartum, you are not going to be able to fix all the things in one class setting or at that one interval that they're doing that one specific movement. So not thinking about it as an all or nothing, like, oh, I can't help fix everything, so I'm just not going to say anything. Think about fixing one thing at a time, or helping cue one thing at a time. So I'll do this a ton in my own classes. If I see a mom in the corner doing like a barbell squat and her core is flared, I'm going to find the first easy kind of like closest apple to the ground. What is the, that was so not the right analogy, but lowest hanging fruit. There we go. Sometimes I lose my train of thought. But I'm going to fix the easiest thing that will make the biggest impact first. So if I notice that her feet are like off centered or off track, I'm just going to shift her feet into place, have her continue to doing her squats, and then go on with the class. And then I'll kind of over time, pick different cues and help her align herself. Maybe it's stacking her core on top of her hips. Maybe it's pulling her belly button to her spine. Maybe it's dropping her shoulders out. Whatever the movement is, whatever the situation is, fixing one thing at a time. And then over time in a class setting, that can still make big impacts. But we want to just help them improve enough each time. Again, this is in class setting. So if we're in an in-person one-on-one, this is a whole different dynamic of you can really like pinpoint things, but on the go, fixing what you can and kind of picking the lowest hanging fruit to work on first so that we can still make progress. But it might just take a little bit more time because we're not able to cater ourselves specifically to this one person the whole time. Along with that, the third thing I recommended was to have a set of like cues in your tool belt, essentially, for quick on the spot adjustments. So things that I like to use include ribs over hips. I use this almost every single class I have, whether it be my daily ladies classes or my postpartum specific classes. That ribs over hips helps reduce that rib flare. So we're getting our core more stacked. It's helping our back alignment. So we are corking our low back for low back pain purposes. We're getting our pelvic floor and our diaphragm stacked together, so that can help with pelvic floor symptoms. So that ribs over hips or stacking the front of your rib cage over the top of your hips just is a really helpful, quick, easy cue. I can just yell it out to everybody. It's going to be helpful for all of the clients that are in the class at the same time. Love that cue. The second one is belly button to spine. Again, quick, easy. Pulls that core in deep instead of pushing forward and outwards on that linea alba or that connective tissue midline. Again, just a helpful deep core engagement cue that everybody can apply, but I can make it specific to my postpartum or pregnant moms who really need that on the spot guidance. I'll also cue to exhale and then lift. In general, if they don't know breath work, it still can be helpful to exhale and then come out of the deadlift or come out of the squat. I don't say exhale on exertion because we should be exhaling prior to our lift and then throughout the hardest part of the movement pattern, essentially. So just saying exhale, then come up, or exhale, then lift, whatever the movement is, that is another easy cue. And then lastly, in terms of like quick cues to have, I like to cue to like be able to wiggle your toes, and that helps decrease the amount of like toe clenching or gripping into the ground with the front of our toes that we commonly will experience. And it pulls the weight into the back and midfoot of their heel or of their foot in general, so that they can have a more balanced stance, which then can help everything else align from the bottom up, as well as unclenching your butt. So this tension stuff, gripping the toes, clenching the butt, that can create extra tension that can spark different symptoms and pains. So just in general, cueing ways that we can release tension in the body. So that was number 3 of like how to coach within a class setting. And the fourth one is the most important, I think. Well, not most important, but something that all coaches can apply to their own business. And that is opening up one-on-one consultations, which is almost like a new revenue stream essentially for you, especially if you are Mother FIGR certified or have a different kind of pregnancy and postpartum certification. Working with them one-on-one in depth before going into classes can really help them not only stay committed to your classes, but also help them feel a deeper connection with you. They feel more supported. They know that they're in good hands, that they have a coach who understands them, and then they can go about their own modifications and own scaling by themselves once they learn what you can teach them in a one-on-one setting. So if you are a coach or provider, this is a huge piece to be able to open up that one-on-one time slot option. And then if you're a mom or a pregnant mom or postpartum mom yourself, being able to have that one-on-one time with your coach can make a huge difference in your own approach and fears or mindset around fitness in that specific gym setting, because you know that you're now taken care of and you kind of can have more things under your own belt, more tools under your own belt when you go into your workouts too. This is why I actually started my own postpartum class, because that's my whole clientele, and doing it in a class setting where we're not postpartum or pregnancy specific was getting tough to do everything individually. So I have a 6-week postpartum course. I do it twice a week for 6 weeks, or class twice a week for 6 weeks, where we go through breath work, we go through deep core engagement, and we build all the way back up into impact and running and lifting. And so this is my way of being able to serve the postpartum moms that I work with before they get back into my classes. So it's kind of I use it almost as like a ramp on into my ladies classes, because then I know in my daily ladies classes, they know what to do. They know how to engage. They know how to breathe. We've already worked on all their symptoms, and we can kind of continue that into a normal group fitness class setting, which is ultimately what a lot of moms want to get back to. They don't want to have to think about themselves as postpartum for forever. They want to be able to get back into their own stuff. So either providing one-on-one consultations or small group sessions for whether it be pregnant or postpartum moms can be huge to then feel more comfortable coaching them or being in a class setting. The third Q&A that I wanted to approach was glute squeezing, or like thrusting your hips at the top of a deadlift or squat. A lot of the ladies in the course kind of had the conception that at the top of a squat, for instance, or at the top of the deadlift, you should be squeezing your butt at the top to get more glute activation under your belt. So it's more effective glute training, essentially. And that's something I kind of dismissed, or we kind of went through, and I wanted to explain why I had my mindset or lens that I had. So everything when it comes to postpartum and pregnancy training, I look through the lens of core and pelvic floor health. So that's the two systems during pregnancy and during postpartum that are altered or changed by our growing baby and then birth itself. And so those are the systems that we want to look through, like what's happening there when we approach our general fitness classes or exercise or whatever it is. So when it comes to squeezing the glutes at the top of a squat or a deadlift, the first thing that's happening is those glutes are tucking underneath our body, essentially, which is creating extra posterior pelvic floor tension. And from my own experience, I talked about this in my pelvic floor podcast, I think it was last week or the week before, that extra tension can create a host of different symptoms in your pelvic floor. It can create feelings of pressure or heaviness like prolapse. It can create incontinence or leaking. It can create pain, all kinds of things. And so that posterior pelvic floor tension is going to be increased when we squeeze our glutes under and tuck our butt. So anytime we're squeezing our butt cheeks really tight, the back of our pelvic floor is also going to be turning on. And so that's creating unnecessary tension in the pelvic floor by tucking. Also, when we squeeze at the top and kind of thrust our hip forward, our pelvic floor is now not perfectly stacked or aligned with the diaphragm. And when the diaphragm and pelvic floor are in line, that is when we see the optimal function and functionality of the pelvic floor, which means less pain, less symptoms like incontinence and prolapse, and just better strength overall. And so there's going to be a greater chance of these things if our pelvic floor is now out of sync or out of whack with that diaphragm at the top. We're just not properly aligned, so we have greater chance of symptoms there. When we tuck our butt under as well, we kind of pinch our low back. So if you think about it, when you're standing up from a deadlift, let's say, we're pinching our butt forward, and that kind of like automatically arches our back in a little way too. And that low back pinching over time, especially when we have weight on our shoulders or weight below us, that is going to add to the pressure that's going onto our low back. So now we're increased our back pain, which is all set up in that pelvis region as well. As we come up as well, we have our ribs flared, which means our core is going to be pushed forward, which is going to put extra pressure down that midline, which is not going to help with healing or connection of that diastasis or of that midline connective tissue. And so from a core perspective, that thrusting forward, that really like exaggerated rib cage with the exaggerated hips, that is also going to create extra symptoms potentially that we do not want. All of these are specific to glute squeezing or hip thrusting after like a squat or a deadlift, but it really comes down to alignment issues that in general we want to avoid that can help, that would, increase our symptoms. So anytime we're out of alignment or out of whack with our pelvic floor, our pelvis, our low back, our rib cage, that is going to affect how our core and pelvic floor are functioning. And so from any exercise perspective, we want to stay as aligned and as neutral through our back and through our front of our core as possible, so we can keep our core engagement, our alignment with our pelvic floor, and just our overall like functionality of our core system. And that's going to help increase strength, increase connection, and decrease symptoms overall. So from that angle, like, it is not worth the potential maybe small extra glute activation if we get that little squeeze at the top. But thinking of it through a core and pelvic floor lens can really help help with symptoms, help with strength, help with pain management for pregnancy and postpartum, but also for strength training throughout the course of anyone's fitness career. So those were the 3 Q&A pieces. I can do 100 more of these. I actually plan to do a lot when it comes to just like general client questions in a class setting or on DMs or whatever it is. So I plan to do a lot more of these. But this was from a coach's perspective specifically, but we can apply it to if you are a pregnant and postpartum mom and can use it for your own good as well. So in the comments or the podcast notes, I'm going to drop the coach's course waitlist. I will not be doing another one until after maternity leave, so spring of 2026. But these are just some of the topics that came up specifically with the cohort that we had in person this time around. It's also a virtual option, so you can join from Zoom, but plan to do a lot more of these Q&A style podcasts. Let me know if it helped or things that you want to be touched upon in some of these episodes, so we can keep on keeping on. So with that, I will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Mother Figures podcast. If these episodes help or resonate with you in any way, it would be so helpful to the show if you could leave a review so we can get this into more moms' hands. And if you're looking for even more guidance and direction when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum fitness, I got you covered. My Mother Figures app subscription includes my Figure Pregnancy and Figure Postpartum workout programs, in addition to our general fitness programs. You'll get the day-by-day workouts you need to help you feel strong, pain-free, and labor-ready during pregnancy, and also the recovery, strength, and progressions you'll need to get back to the activities you love, full of strength and without symptoms after baby arrives. If you're local to the Brighton, Michigan area, I also host daily women's functional fitness classes, a 6-week postpartum return to fitness course, and pregnancy and postpartum consultation sessions. For those who are providers, coaches, or practitioners in the space, I hold a live Mother FIGRs certification course that equips you with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to train and work with this population. For information on all of these services and programs, make sure to check out fitisgettingreal.com/moms or head to the show notes for the direct link. I'm so thankful that you tuned in today's episode, and I will catch you next time.